All right, welcome back to the House Environment Committee. We are going to have a committee discussion on S325, an act relating to regional planning and activity tier jurisdiction. So members, we've been on at least a 2-week journey of pretty intense testimony and exploration of Act 181. What's going well and what is in the bucket of needs improvement. I think just to kind of, I guess, level set, I would start with the reality that the road rule and tier 3 are certainly not going in the direction that we expected or hoped they would go. We've heard, I think, very sincere input from people about how it was proposed and the effects it would have on their land. And but in conjunction with that, and hopefully your inboxes have been shifting some too, people are, I think, really coming to the table with ideas and suggestions for, if we could put this aside, then maybe we could have a refresh a little bit like what we just heard from the last witness. So I've been doing a lot of thinking over the weekend, and I'm sure you all have too. I would just put out there that I think it's time for us to, I feel like maybe the tier concept even broadly is dividing us. So I want to rethink maybe even that very fundamental thing, but certainly we don't need our shared interest in protecting our environment to divide Vermont, particularly at this moment. So I guess I'll start by saying that I'm looking at repealing the road rule and the tier 3 and revisiting how we structure that in a path that goes forward. So just start the conversation there. Representative Wade.
Thanks. Yeah. Looking over this bill, I mean, I think some of the things I hear what you're saying. I mean, this seems very divisive given that we all have a shared interest in protecting our environment. But I would agree that, I would support repealing the road rule in tier 3, getting the other deadlines that they need once those two are put out of the picture. That seems important, particularly like this tier 2 report seems like it takes on an entirely different sort of significance if there's no tier 3. And it may be, they certainly need to extend the deadline. There may be some scope we want to look at in the actual report as well, or some other studies. I mean, part of it seems to be that we do want to find a way to make sure we protect our most critical habitats. And like, how can we do that? And it's not through sort of an Act 250 tier way. What do we do? And whether that's, we ask someone to look into that or not, if the answers aren't there, I think that would be a good idea. The other thing I'd like us to look at, because I just don't know much about it, like more, is this Senate floor amendment. Like, what was behind that? Because it seems like it would actually allow building in areas where maybe we don't want building, or it could be dangerous too. So I wonder, I'd just like to take a look at that as well. So, I mean, those are sort of where I'm coming from and see what we can do in the bill. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I agree with a lot of what Mike said. And I don't want to rebut what Kate said earlier, but in fact, I want to support what she said earlier. I think maybe there was a little bit of a misinterpretation of what I was trying to say. I was really trying to make the point that I think Act 250 is too weak to protect the natural resources that we need to protect, because the only barrier it provides really is a financial one. That's the primary barrier. That you can knock that over with enough money. So I don't think it's necessarily the right tool to protect the things that are really critical. If something's really critical, there ought to be like a permanent boundary. I mean, you just can't, more like the I like the term, I hadn't heard that one before, the media-based permitting, water, et cetera. Media-based permitting, where it's like, it's black and white. So it's a yes or no. It's not a nuanced kind of, well, maybe you should go over here. So I think maybe you were misunderstanding what I was trying to. I fully agree. There's things we need to protect. And I also fully agree. And I'm coming from the perspective that we have heard, I think, overwhelmingly from the property owners, the people who own the land on which those critical resources exist, Because they want to be part of identifying even the questions, like what needs to be protected and how do we do it, rather than just here's the map, here's what we're gonna do. Now you know about it, so now deal with it. You know, they got brought in way after the fact, and they just need to be brought in earlier, which I think is your point. So
Yeah,
I'm in agreement with what I think what's been said here, which is repeal, start over, and involve the broader community on really how to go about saving these.
although I think you do bring up a good point. We've had and have plenty of great, I mean, lots of opportunities, and we certainly gotten folks engaged now.
Yes, we have their
Now
ear here now.
How to keep them engaged.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
those watching at home, we want you to stay engaged
Yes.
as we move this conversation and process forward. Ooh, tie. Shaping them.
Yeah, I guess I'm particularly feeling it today, like we've been just saying that stuff out loud, and you, there's like a big loss over this 2-year process,
Mhm.
and how hard it is to start over with some of that. And yet it feels so clear to me that that is an important next step is to really start over with these pieces around protecting forest fragmentation and critical natural resources. And I'm really appreciative. Particularly, I'll just say, I think our testimony over the last 2 weeks has been so
Fabulous.
thoughtful, well-researched, considerate, and constructive. Like nobody came in here and just said, these are all problems. Everybody also said, here are ideas. And I just want to be grateful. And I think a lot of us feel that way. I won't speak for the committee, but it's a lot of heads nodding. So I just want to say those things out loud. I am regretful that the process wasn't clear, that we wanted to get narrow on what are the critical natural resources. And that has been done. Like we did there are 3 critical natural resources that are not well protected currently with our regulatory system. And that's useful. And I'm sorry that it wasn't, what I'm regretful about is not that part. It's that it wasn't clear that we wanted, and some people have said it was, and so we've gotten sort of mixed messages on this, I think, in the committee. But when I read the bill over the weekend, I didn't take the whole bill. When I read the sections about tier 3 and that piece, it's not clear to me that we may have intended, or now we certainly wish we had been explicit about asking to look at all the tools in the toolbox, regardless, not just Act 250 as the mechanism, but what are the regulatory, voluntary, and incentive tools that we should be looking at now that we're narrowing in. And so I guess as we move forward, I'm really hopeful that we could start there and acknowledge that, especially with the equity issues that are arising at the end of this sort of 2-year process, or in the middle of this multi-year process, that when you've got such equity issues and who this may affect, I think it's really important to be looking particularly at voluntary and incentive tools, in addition to any regulatory tools. And so I'm both sort of mourning that we have to start over in some ways, but also excited that we do actually have new information from the last 2 years that I think we can be starting from a different place than 2 years ago.
Representative Logan.
Yeah, I appreciate both of your remarks. Yeah, no, I am grateful that we've had really helpful testimony that's been very productive, especially in a moment where there's just a lot of political and emotional tension. And so I'm excited about learning from the process that has happened so far, and then refocusing ourselves on surfacing our real goals and what a better path towards getting to those goals might be. I also think it's helpful for us to look back, might be helpful for us to look back at Act 181 together a little bit, because I think it's interesting when you look at 181, and of course I remember these conversations really clearly, but like when you look back at elements of a regional plan, for example, in 181, it was supposed to include forest blocks, habitat connectors, recreation. So something has been lost in translation. The process was not well designed, or or designed at all. I'm not entirely sure. So the somehow integrating this understanding that we develop over this forthcoming process about what is critical for us to protect seems like it does need to be part of our overall planning process for at the community level, even. It seems to me like that. I would be interested in having that conversation about, okay, how can we bring this conversation back to the community level again?
So that's great. If I just update folks, Ellen's in the room. Tomorrow, we're going to spend time with her on 325, but also on the sections of 181 that are relevant to the conversation. So
Nice.
if you spend time with your copy tonight and think about which sections you want to review with the whole committee, that would be really helpful. And yes, I mean, I think one thing that's so interesting to me is that I feel like we're in the midst of it's a sea change in how we've done planning. At the same time where we have an urgency around the housing. And I think that's where a lot of the urgency came from. We are also going to hear later in the week updated testimony on the forest fragmentation report, which started a lot of these conversations. It came in 2015. And one of the things that spun out of that was this inclusion of forest blocks and habitat connectors in town planning, and hearing how that's going and getting, I know a lot of towns have struggled with that. And so I do wonder how that's going and how well it's been integrated into the regional plans, because the towns haven't all probably been able to do that work yet either. Anyway, we finished?
Yeah, thanks.
Representative Austin.
I agree, that we really should start over, and I'm curious about some of the regulatory tools that he was suggesting are either in place or need to be developed for ATF3. I'm just going to say I thought about this a lot, maybe because I was an EMT, and with climate change and long roads, I'm concerned about accessing homes at the end of long roads that with climate change might be getting wiped out 2 or 3 times due to rain events. And I just want to make sure that Vermonters are not responsible for repairing destruction. I don't know how you can, connect it to climate change. I'm still trying to figure out how you can say this is because of climate change that we've been having these, or, this weather event. But, we've spent over $1 billion repairing towns. People were talking the other day about building in a wetland or close to a wetland. It's really concerning to me. And I guess I feel like if people want to do that, that's their option. But I just really don't want Vermonters to have to continue to pay to repair kind of ill advised or ill, not thought out in the time of climate change. Because I think that's what's happening, and that concerns me.
So I think there's also some buckets that I'm hoping that folks will be paying attention to, which is, so for me, that questions like that, I don't know if it's formed yet, but might go into the tier 2 report or whatever we name that, and how we augment it to help us keep track. Like, I mean, I'm interested in how many long private roads already are there, and do we know how much they've cost during the recent flooding?
Right.
Some towns, I think, are keeping track. Representative Tavia.
I want to try to concentrate on some of the positives. Number one, I have been trying to get people involved civically involved, going to planning commission meetings, select board meetings for years now. It's been a slow process. This has put that process on steroids. So I'm very happy that there are a lot of people who are paying attention. For me, that's a positive. And Sarita, to your point, I have two towns, or well, four, but Washington, the town of Washington is straddled by two branches, right down 110, trying to find a way for the town of Washington to be able to expand, to be able to have some sort of a real, a downtown or a center without having that risk. We've got two churches. We've got a school that's supposed to be an evacuation center that needed to be evacuated during the December 2023, I think it was 2023 rains, because the river was rising so much. So there's a lot to think about, and allowing somebody, finding ways to not allow, to encourage growth away from the rivers when they used to be a source of revenue and they're not anymore, and not crippling the town. I'm all for it. The town in East Corinth, same thing. On one
Can I
side
just
of the road.
clarify?
Yeah, sure.
Historically, where growth has occurred, I have no problem helping people
Oh,
with
yeah.
that or
Oh.
rebuilding something. It's just from this point on.
I don't
No,
think that's,
okay.
I don't
I just
think
wanna
that's
make
what
that
people
clear.
have the ideas, but
Yeah.
with East Corinth, on one side of the road going through East Corinth, you've got topography to deal with. It's almost, vertical, steep slope. On the other side, you've got the river. The East Corinth store, I would love for the East Corinth store to stay in business and find a new location so that every time there's a flood, everybody doesn't have to come out and help sandbag to keep the place from being damaged. But it's a fixture in the town, and try to make it go away without having a place for it to relocate close, to me I think would be a harm to the town. So having people engaged the way they are, sometimes debate is, let's call it vigorous, but at least we're still having it, and I'm thankful for it.
I was just loading the atlas because when people talk about their towns, I want to be able to, I was looking up Washington. I wasn't not paying attention, just so you know.
No, that's fine.
All right, others. Representative Pritchard.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we all heard some really great testimony. From people that were very passionate. And for me, again, I'm glad to see the direction we're going on this as far as the repeal of Tier 3 and the road rule. And I know it's hard for Ella a little bit, but it's the right thing to do, I think. I think one of the things that got lost in this process was, an important natural resource. And that's really the culture of this state and the people of this state. And, they feel they were bypassed and they've lost their trust. And I'm hoping by what we've done here, we're gonna restore some of that. So, yeah, I think it was a good process. It was good for everybody, and I hope these, we really take it a step further and involve these people directly in this process, get their buy-in. These people want all the things that, I think we do, and that some of the members are very, very passionate about. And they want to be felt that they're capable of achieving that. They feel that they've proved that through their stewardship in the state over the last 200 years. And I'm grateful to the committee and that it looks like we've gotten to where we need to be for these folks. Thank you.
Representative Stecker.
Yeah, I want to just say that I really appreciate this discussion really, really deeply and feel like everything I've heard so far from people who have spoken so far that I think I pretty strongly agree with almost everything that I've heard. And that feels great. Um, when we passed 181, it was sort of the culmination, not that this work is ever really done, but in some sense, it was the culmination of a pretty long path of lots of people having conversations and negotiations over a really long period of time, stretching back, years and years. And one of the deeply satisfying parts of passing that law was being able to put in place things that a lot of people had advocated for a really long time. And what we're talking about right now is letting go of some of that, which while I agree is necessary and the right thing to do in this moment, it does make me feel a little bit concerned. At the same time, one of the wonderful things about the conversations I've had with some folks in my community, a lot of the emails that we've gotten, a lot of the conversations we've had in this building, is that there is actually a pretty decent consensus around the idea that these are important resources and that we do need to protect them. And we do need to figure out how to make sure that they're going to be here in 20 years, 50 years, 100 years. And so that part of this conversation has been extremely satisfying and has really made me very hopeful that even though we are going to step back from this at this moment, that we're still going to be able to move forward on these things in a different way. And I'm really hoping that we can, before we leave here, find some tangible things that we can do to help ensure that that happens.
I just want to, partly for myself and maybe partly for the record, just want to clarify that when we say maybe we do end up protecting these critical natural resources that have been identified, I personally don't mean as they were mapped in October. And I think that's important for us to be clear about, that things like how habitat connectors were defined by the LURB, like I'm not comfortable with that. And I'm hoping that those look really different, tapped and look very different and much more prioritized when we go through this next iteration of this process in a very different way, and perhaps not even within the same. Yeah, so I just wanted to acknowledge that like habitat connectors are critically important, I believe, but not the way they were mapped in October, or even the way they've been defined at all by the LURB.
Senator Morris?
Slightly different approach. We passed out Act 181, spent a lot of time with it and a lot of discussion. It got amended and changed and eventually passed out with a 3-tier system. And what we've heard as we stood up the LURB, they were appointed and stood up. We have a professional board now, which was supposed to make things more consistent, increase educational opportunities for the district commissioners. So they were enforcing permits consistently across the state. Those improve housing in tier 1A, 1B, or 1B opportunities. The local municipality had zoning boards and infrastructure. I think to your point, there was a push here to enable housing to happen in specific areas, albeit it's a small area. We talk about trust, and yeah, we lost trust. But I'm not convinced that that trust was predicated on a preliminary release of a map from rules that were yet to be created for tier 3. Alex sat here and said that they posted the map and then they took it down because of the lack of trust it was creating. I just have some concerns going forward, and I hope I'm wrong, that as and I agree with repeal of the road rule in tier 3 for this time period. I'm concerned that if we're going to develop trust for whatever gets recreated for tier 3s or our critical natural resource areas, that the LURB, the administration, they have to be part of this. The community has to be part of this. And if we're not going to be willing to work together, I fear that that trust will not be replaced with future trust. That's my concern. But I agree with the repeal at this point in time.
Yeah, I just wanna echo what Larry said or Representative Sakowicz, just I hope before we leave this session, we can set something in motion, something that is gonna lead us to however we're going to protect the lands, whatever the ways, you know, either getting input or coming, just having a conversation. But I would like to not wait, 9 months.
Yeah, good segue. Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of why we're here. I mean, we're gonna do our best in the time we have to, I think, clarify the problem we're trying to solve and articulate at least a path forward. So I don't know the depths we'll be able to get to in the time we have, but I do think that that's what I would like us to use our energy on now going forward. Is we're going to hear some more important testimony this week. It's not this week's agenda, so many agendas. But in particular, well, with our legislative council, but the fourth fragmentation piece, I think is going to help remind us. I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that we have so much time in this committee and so many resources for learning about what's going on. And so I keep imagining maybe it's an abbreviated version, or maybe there's a long version for folks who are really interested, but to maybe an hour-long video of, I thought John Groman did a great level set at the beginning of this 2-week on the history of this activity and where we are. And then information on, we happened to hear that same day from Fish and Wildlife and V-Trans on corridors and why they're important. And now we're going to hear about fragmentation. I mean, we get to do all of this ongoing education and making that available more broadly to Vermonters would help people understand what is the problem we're trying to solve. Why are we even talking about this? And I mean, I still have echoes, and I want us to capture from all the great testimony. Ed Stanek was like, people don't even, I mean, Act 250 is so much of a background of Vermont. People are sometimes not even aware of its role in their community. And I think finding a way to make that happen should be also part of what we're doing. It's just educating folks. And I do want to noodle on the whether tiers are even the right language to be using, because I think it's super important for the 1A and B areas to exist, but they are not exempt areas. They are areas where towns are putting a lot of resources into development review and saying we're willing to adopt the criteria and take this over. And so the perception now that there's sort of like haves and have-nots, certainly not meant to happen. And maybe it doesn't work with the idea of the tier. The whole state of Vermont right now is covered under Act 250. So there isn't a tier really. The idea was for towns who wanted to get rid of what is redundant permitting to take that on themselves. But not every town, we've taken testimony. A lot of towns depend on Act 250. And I think that's actually the beauty of it. And this idea that we're just maturing into now, we never had towns that could do this themselves, and now we do. And so that frees up state resources to support our rural communities in other ways as developments get proposed across the state in towns that don't have it. There's a lot to think about. Happy to have final comments, but I also think we could wind down.
just to add to that, it's almost like what we currently call tier one. It's almost like it's a delegated area.
It's a delegated area, because that's the word I've been using. Exactly. We're talking about how do we delegate other things?
Yeah, the criteria are essentially still the same. They have to be, right? They have to be included in that town zoning. And we're just delegating the town to do it rather than this.
Yep.
Great. I mean, more local control is better.
Delegating.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
And then dividing up the whole state into different tiers sounded, what other term to use other than kind of classist, or, you know, it's very divisive. So I'd be happy to just get rid of the tier and just call them
Delegated areas, yeah.
And everybody else would just under to.
Just Vermont.
Yeah, and then there's maybe additional media protection that's needed for
Yeah.
things that are focused on.
Yeah.
I think there's a path forward. We just gotta.
All right. With that, we are on for tomorrow at 9. Oh, but you know what? I think there will be an amendment. I'm not sure, but stay tuned on our role in reviewing any potential amendment to 218. Just so. If
So we
you're,
might need to come before 9.
it might mean that.
Office before 9.
I sort of doubt it would mean that. I think, because I think you'll have we'll have a reprise where, yeah, and I think we could, so judiciary will probably hear it first, same as today, and then maybe let's count on doing it for lunch.
Getting it in between 9 and 12.
Yeah, and Ellen, can you come any earlier than 11? Do you know? That'd be great. So I think, I don't know. John's gonna need a whole hour, so I think we could start Ellen it a little earlier. But anyway, and then we'll have time maybe to hear the amendment before. All right, thank you all. With that, we are adjourned for